Welcome to Political Trade Secrets, an inside look at campaigns and politics, where we pull back the curtain, look under the hood, and investigate all aspects of politics and how elections are won. Now, here's your host, Dustin Olson.
Pollster and host of the Political Trade Secrets podcast, Dustin Olson.
Dustin Olson.
Dustin Olson.
And Dustin Olson, pollster at American Pulse. They work for both Republicans and Democrats. And he hosts a podcast, Political Trade Secrets. Oh, we love that. We like that podcast.
Now, from Washington, D.C., is pollster Dustin Olson.
And welcome to the Political Trade Secrets Show. Thank you for being here. Today we have a jam-packed program for you. We're going to be talking about the government shutdown showdown, and we'll be talking about the New York City mayor's race with Eric Adams out. Where does the race go from here? Plus a couple of the cringeworthy ads that are being played up there. And then we're also going to be remembering the October 7th and all the victims. And what, how public opinion has shifted over 2 years, or how it hasn't really, and what you can glean from that. And then, and really just, commemorating, all those who lost their lives that day, have lost their lives in the intervening 2 years, as well as, hopefully the hostages they're going to be brought back home. So with that, thank you for being here today. Like, subscribe, and follow wherever you're enjoying the podcast. We do appreciate it. If you're watching this during the live stream, post comments, questions, reviews. That really makes a difference. All of it helps amplify the message and amplifies the show, and we do appreciate your engagement, and also makes it a lot more fun for me. So if you can do that, we really do appreciate your help with that. So I'm going to go on to the first segment here. We're going to be talking about October 7th. It's today's October 7th. 2 years ago today, we saw the barbaric and heinous attack by Hamas on Israel, civilians being attacked. Just, we don't need to dwell on it, but just how horrific all of that was. And, there's been a lot that's happened in this country since then. During that time period following the initial attacks, we did our own landmark survey on national security, the Middle East, and what people's reactions were to that horrible day. And if you want to go to pollingclub.com, you can get access to that and other surveys as we go through all this. You can actually get that for yourself. But one of the things I think is interesting from our survey, so we did this about a few weeks after the attacks that day, and it's interesting just how quickly a lot of these paid protests that turned into riots on campuses, how quickly that happened, and how quickly the American public actually reacted to that. In our survey at that time, 57% told us that universities where these pro-Hamas rallies and riots were happening had become, quote, breeding grounds for anti-Semitism, which is pretty shocking. And I think for a lot of people, it was shocking just how quickly this kind of reaction had happened. And people were pretty shocked that there was that reaction. And one of the things that we also thought was interesting to check out, and I actually think this had a big impact on the 2024 election. We asked people if they believe the open border, our southern border, if it was making us vulnerable to being exploited by drug cartels, foreign terrorists, our foreign adversaries like China. And 65% of Americans said that they did believe that was the case. And that was ultimately on Biden. And you fast forward to 2024, inflation and the economy were, of course, extremely important. But I do think in continuing to this day, where we see roughly about 60% of the population are generally pro whatever strong security measures, are pro enforcing immigration laws. Generally, that's where most of the country is. It's about 60%, depending on the issue. If you go to deporting illegal immigrants who've committed crimes, it jumps to 75%. But it was really on October 7th that Americans became aware of how having not control of our border could cause something like that to happen in our own country. So people were pretty aware of that. Now, interestingly, we asked people, which side were they on in America? Were you with Israel or with Hamas? And 75% overall support for Israel following the attacks, which is very solid, strong support, and not too surprising. Now, something you fast forward 2 years from then, a lot of people would assume that that's changed quite a bit with all the all the riots on campuses, all the stuff you see on social media. There's definitely been an anti-Semitic strain that's shown up in a lot of corners of the internet. But interestingly, in the August Harvard-Harris poll, which came out in late August. They just had their new poll came out yesterday, which we'll be talking about in a little bit, because there's some interesting things that came from that. But in the August Harvard-Harris poll, asking the same question, 74% of voters still support Israel over Hamas. I find that remarkable. You watch the media, you watch what people are saying online, you see these, really they're rent riots that happen on these campuses, paid and funded by all these networks of left-wing donors and organizations. It's all a little bit of a facade, but you see all that and you assume that public opinion has changed radically. And obviously 74% still supporting Israel over Hamas 2 years later. That's pretty remarkable. Obviously, it's a different polling firm, different pollster than our poll, but even if you account for margin of error and everything else, that is directionally says that things haven't really changed too much on overall support for Israel. Now, where I think there's a difference is in the radicalization of some of these, this small minority of Americans, and within that, a portion of those folks have become radicalized online, on campus, and all these different places. It's part of the same radical left-wing rhetoric that we've seen that has inflamed anti-ICE violence that we're seeing in cities across the country, that we saw in the assassination of Charlie Kirk. All of this is from the same kind of existential threat type of language that we're seeing from the radical left. People talk about the violence that's happening in the political realm, and it is definitely proportionally on one side. There's a poll that came out within 24 hours of the horrible events that led to Charlie Kirk's assassination. And in that YouGov poll, while it showed that both sides have people who thought violence was acceptable against their political opponents, it was only 3% of very conservative folks, and it was 25% of very liberal folks. And it actually, on that spectrum, it goes to conservative is about 5 or 6%, and then moderate was about 9%, liberal 17%, and then very liberal 25%. Blows your mind to think there are people like that, but you can see that there's, within very liberal, there's 25% who believe these radical things. And one of the things that it's interesting when you look at this overall across the country, Americans back Israel, but then you have these pockets of radicalization, and some places it's a lot larger. We'll be talking a lot more about the New York City mayor's race here in a little bit, but when you look at the New York City mayor's race, we got a lot of coverage over the summer from our initial poll in the New York City mayor's race, because we asked the question about Zohran Mamdani and his previous stances of supporting the BDS movement, which is an anti-Israeli movement, as well as his refusal to denounce the anti-Semitic phrases like globalized intifada, and how that was impacting the race. The good news is a majority of New Yorkers said it made them less likely to vote for him. However, shockingly, 1/3 of New Yorkers actually said that anti-Semitic, globalized intifada, and BDS positions that actually made them more likely to vote for him, which is just blows my mind. I see a question from someone on Facebook. Do you think that 25% number explains what we've seen with Jay Jones in Virginia this week? That's a great question. You watch these odd year races, even though I think Zoran Mamdani at this point is likely going to win. We'll talk about that more in a moment. However, you see the Republican in New Jersey surging and in a position to win. You see Jay Jones in Virginia, the attorney general candidate who fantasized about murdering the Speaker of the House, the Republican Speaker of the House, and his wife and his children. I mean, it's just beyond the pale. And the thing that at the moment that we're recording this, while Spanberger, who's the Democrat nominee for governor, has said that she was sickened by those comments. She's not called on him to drop out of the race. Not a single Democrat has done that yet, which is shocking to me. Winsome Sears, who's a Marine and a tough fighter and has the backing of Glenn Youngkin, the current governor, I think she's in a pretty good position now to capitalize on this. Obviously, the current attorney general is going to be able to beat Jay Jones. But anyway, it's just blows my mind. I see Tom on Facebook makes the comment, very happy you brought the show back. Great work as always. Appreciate it, Tom. And thank you for being here and for your comment. So again, wherever you are, if you're watching live, we're on about a dozen different platforms. Please do make a comment and join the conversation. We do appreciate it. But yeah, I think this radicalization, that 25%, it's not just in the most radical activists, but it's in the leadership. I think this is a leadership issue, and you can see it in Governor Pritzker. You can see it in the mayor of Chicago, and you just wonder, this is 1 out of 4 very liberal folks, which is most of where the party's leadership is going. This is you might wonder what they might be saying in private conversations. By the way, that Jay Jones thing, he sent that to a Republican member of the House, I believe a member of the House, but a fellow legislator. Like you wonder what do they say privately to each other, because he sent that in writing to a Republican. It just blows my mind. But thank you for the comments. And yes, I do think that this is all part of the same sickness. And I do think this is where people are going to start looking at these issues and start wondering, what do these elected officials actually think privately and how they talk to each other. Anyway, this is the good news, though, over the last 2 years is that Americans generally are supportive of Israel and are still sickened by what happened on October 7th. And that's where we are. But the amazing thing, though, over the weekend, we saw that now Hamas has agreed to at least some of the points in President Trump's 21-point Gaza peace plan. And that's a big deal for the families who have lost loved ones, for the families who still have someone who's alive, who's been in captivity for 2 years. The idea of having them brought home is amazing for them. And the Jewish faith, of course, being able to bury their loved ones is extremely important. So in the new Harvard CAPS poll that just came out yesterday, 56% of voters support Trump's 21-point Gaza peace plan. It's very new, but that's where it starts off with. And 70% support it after they're told that important and key Arab governments are also supporting it. In a similar vein, 65% of voters support Trump's efforts to end the war in Ukraine. And one of the things I thought was interesting, I'm going to talk about in a second, and kind of how this approach has the possibility of peace could happen, is that 71% also back the U.S. blowing up the drug boats headed here from South America. And why I mention that is I think what you're seeing is an approach also with the shutdown, but you see the approach in with Gaza is incentives and disincentives, and the Trump administration using that. And it's amazing what he's done. He's been able to brand himself as the peace president. I think the folks who have been involved in this whole process, the families of the victims, they put forward a letter to the Nobel Peace Prize Committee in the last day, and he's had multiple people doing this. He now has you viewing him as the peace president. At the same time, in the last week, they've been blowing up drug boats coming from the cartels, as well as over the summer, they bombed the Iran nuclear program. And so he's giving you two ideas. He's the peace president, but he's also the one who's going to go hard against his enemies, and he's not going to pull any punches. That's an amazing thing to have accomplished. So you know that there's a carrot, and you also know there's a stick, and that's a great way to encourage people to go down a certain path. And while I don't know if this whole thing is going to work out, this is amazing that we've gotten to this point, and really want to just think about all those families that are hopefully going to see their loved ones again, as well as for those whose family members died in captivity, that they will get those bodies back. So anyway, that's just a little bit of what I've seen in public opinion here at this important moment. But with that, let's go to the government shutdown, which has been really amazing. It just, who would have expected? Democrats have voted 13 times for a continuing resolution, the same legislation that they're being asked to vote for now. They voted for 13 times before. I guess last week. Now they've voted against it numerous times. But I was on Wake Up America on Friday talking about this topic and going over some of the recent public opinion that is relevant to it and where Americans are and some of the key issues that are being discussed. This is with Charlotte McBride. Rob Astor was in for Mark Lauder. If you want to watch the show, it's on weekdays from 7 to 9 a.m. on Newsmax, and a great team over there. But this is our conversation about that.
All right, this could mean a lot of people don't get a paycheck in the mail. Dustin, what do you make of this and these cuts that could be coming?
Well, it depends on what happens exactly. I doubt they're going to cut to the bone, but there are definitely things in government that people would like to see removed. And going back to what I was saying about the Harvard-Harris poll, they actually have 73% of Americans back the administration's efforts to cut fraud and waste in government. And if this looks like that to Americans, then they will back it, and they have backed it. In our own polling, 55% supported the DOGE efforts. So this is, I think, actually ultimately going to be popular. Now, it could have a big impact in a state like Virginia, that we have a governor's race coming up very soon. I think right now, actually, this probably hurts the Democrat who's running in this race and probably helps the Republican, but it depends on how deep any of these cuts are. So that was our commentary on there on the government shutdown. A couple of things I want to just reiterate there that I thought were interesting in looking at recent numbers. So in the Harvard-Harris poll over in August, the numbers were, let's see, we had about the top 14 of the 15 policies that they're tracking that the president actually has majorities of success or majorities supporting him on those things. That's an amazing number for him to have that. Even when his personal popularity right now is actually better than both Bush and Obama in their second terms, which the media doesn't tell you that, but you can go look at Real Clear Politics and you can compare their second terms at this point, and Trump is actually several points higher than both of them. So you can check that out. But even so, being in the mid to high 40s for his personal favorability, all of his policies are well over 50%. And a couple of those, the top three, the top one, around 78% is support for his efforts to reduce drug prices for Medicare and low income patients. So that's got a lot of support. Secondarily, his other big support is, of course, deporting illegal immigrants who've committed crimes. And then third, that's at 75%. And then 73% are his efforts to reduce waste and fraud in the federal government. And you pick those top three issues where he has the most support on his policies. And a lot of the government shutdown is actually falling along those lines. And that is pretty remarkable to me that the Democrats have allowed that. Now they're pushing onto the larger Obamacare healthcare topic. And there's some, just the uniformity of most of the Democrats has had an impact. And we're also watching what I think is the last gasp of the mainstream media or legacy media having influence on all of this. We've watched how the legacy media has dropped in support over the years, and we track this in our surveys, and we've watched over the last several years. They are now under 50% of the public who gets most of their information from legacy media, podcasts, new media, new media companies like News Nation and Newsmax are starting to get more of that kind of that audience. However, we still have somewhere in the mid to high 40s still getting their information from legacy media. And I do think the uniformity of all the Democrats pushing the healthcare message, making it about that, as well as legacy media propping them up, even though they know that almost everything that's being said is dishonest. It's having somewhat of an effect. But still, with all of that, they're pushing for an additional $1 trillion to keep the government open when 73% of Americans want waste and fraud to be cut from the government and do not want us to have huge deficits like that. And also do not want illegal immigrants to get, taxpayer funded Medicaid. And they do not want able-bodied Americans, men who could get a job or could be volunteering. By the way, this is an interesting thing about the Medicaid rules. The way it's set up is if you do not have a job, if you're an able-bodied, let's say 40-year-old man who could have a job, but you don't want to get a job, but you at least volunteer or try to volunteer somewhere, you can get the Medicaid benefits. Like that is how loose this tougher version is. So the idea that people who are unwilling to work, unwilling to provide any kind of service to their community, are unwilling to look for work, that's all you have to do to get that. And it's interesting that the Kaiser Family Foundation, which is a left-wing organization, tested this back in February, and they actually asked the question of, do you support limiting Medicaid to able-bodied adults who are citizens? And it's around 67%, I believe, that support that. And then when you tell them that by doing so, it protects those benefits for the elderly, for the disabled, and for needy children, that jumps to above 70%. I think it's about 78% who say that they support that. So, that's where the American people are on these topics. So that's where the kind of the battle lines have been drawn on this topic. Again, if you're watching in the live stream, please do post a comment, question, wherever you're watching. We appreciate it. Also, if you're whatever podcast platform you're watching this on, like, share, and follow. we do appreciate it. It does help with the amplification of what we're doing here. But one of the fun things as we move on through this, so I'm going to go to the Harvard CAPS poll. So right now, as of yesterday, now there's not very many good polls out there. I just want to be honest about that. Most of them, if not all of them right now, are 100% online panel, which you've probably heard me talk about that before. It's the worst methodology, and it's cheap, and that's why all these media polls, that's why they do it that way. But the best one, in my opinion, is the Harris poll, or the Harvard Harris poll, because of what Mark Penn started years ago. Is he does a multiple sample of multiple different online panels. What an online panel is it just a bunch of people who opt in to be a part of this group, who then get paid to do polls. Obviously, there's a lot of issues with that, but the problem is, for like an Ipsos poll or a YouGov poll, these are all online panels where 100% of the people have opted in and they're paid to do these polls. They're all within that one panel. So they're, whatever that group of people look like, they are always getting the same polls. They're the ones who are always in that survey. But by doing a multiple sample, going to lots of different online panels and polling from those, they get themselves some diversity. So that's why I recommend the Harvard Harris poll, or most of the Harris polls as far as online panels go. But anyway, going back to what the numbers say, 70% of voters oppose the government shutdown. And when you look at the parties as to who's to blame, it's generally pretty split within the margin of error. Slightly right now, a little bit more towards Republicans. That's probably because that's how the media has always said it is, and they are leaning pretty hard on it. But that being said, the next numbers I think are really interesting and actually kind of tell you where it's going to go. So 62% of the public think Republicans will win the shutdown, which is not something you'd expect voters to think. Then 65% say that the Democrats should throw in the towel and pass the continuing resolution at current spending levels, which I thought was pretty amazing. But the next thing is even more amazing. When you look at the crosstabs, even 39% of Democrats and 63% of independents think the Democrats should pass the continuing resolution and move on from this. So even within their own voters, this is why I think the radical element of the party is definitely, it's the tail wagging the dog. They're the ones who are pushing this. And you have Chuck Schumer, who clearly is very much, it's two things going on with Chuck Schumer. It's, of course, he's concerned about a possible primary from AOC or some other Democratic socialist, someone like a Mamdani, that he could be taken out from that wing of the party. And it's very likely that would happen. The Siena poll earlier this year did a hypothetical matchup. They had AOC beating Schumer. Also in statewide polls, Schumer's popularity is in the tank. AOC is actually pretty popular statewide. So when you look at this, Schumer really has a real problem if he wants to get reelected and if he gets a real challenge within his party. Now, I think that's only part of it. What I really think is that earlier this year, when he actually helped keep the government open, he got so much flack from the left wing of the party that I think he just doesn't want to go through that again. He'd rather take flack from the other side and see what that's like. So I think that's largely what you're seeing. I do think at some point you're going to see him go to a few of his members, tell them, he may not even say publicly that he's for ending the shutdown, but letting them go ahead and voting with Republicans to keep the government open. I think that's probably how it ends. I don't know when that's going to happen, but moving on to what I think is interesting, because it shows that the American people are much more savvy than what you'd expect them to be, or what the media might expect them to be. As a pollster, I have to say, voters are incredibly smart. They're sometimes ignorant of the issues or policies, but when you get them to focus, they usually can figure things out. But 55% of voters say the Democrats behind the shutdown are motivated by pleasing their base. So majority of voters get what's going on here, which is why I think ultimately they think that Republicans are going to win this thing. So with that, I think that's one of the that's most of the public opinion that is important when it comes to this. Now, also in the background, we talked about all the radical stuff going on. Uh, there's certain moments in time where you see an inflection point within public opinion. Back when we had the absolute collapse of Afghanistan under the Biden administration, you can just look at the direction of the country, and you can look at Biden's favorability. And at that point, his presidency was over. In our national security polls we've done over the last couple of years, we have the survey we did over the summer on Iran and their nuclear program. We have the post October 7th poll we did 2 years ago. And throughout, we've touched based on a few issues. And the American people believe that the fall of Afghanistan, the absolute collapse of the Biden policy there, and that weakness led to the invasion of Ukraine, which led to the attack on Israel on October 7th. And you can just see in the numbers when you graph it that there's an inflection point. Another place where you've seen an inflection point already, it's interesting watching public opinion very closely. About the time frame of March, April, and May of 2024, so well before Trump was even had his conviction in Manhattan, you saw in different polls, Wall Street Journal polls, one of the key ones, that Biden was starting to lose with key minority groups, and that Trump was starting to pick those up. And in poll after poll, when you looked at, some of them weren't accounting for, shy Trump voters, you saw that Trump was on track to win at that point. And then you saw the conviction in Manhattan, and 80% of the public saying that there's a double standard in the legal and justice system, and the bottom was already falling out. So politically, the country is already on the move to Donald Trump was going to get elected. However, there's a key inflection point that happened there later in that month when we had the debate between Biden and Trump. And our polling, almost 2/3 of the country saw that moment, or a little bit more than 2/3 of the country saw that moment at the debate. As I was talking about earlier, we've seen this drop in legacy media, but at that point, it's about a little bit over 50% getting their information from legacy media, who had not been telling them. If you're somebody who's watching Fox News or watching podcasts or watching anything with your two eyes and you're seeing Joe Biden, you knew he had problems. But if you're just watching news that didn't tell you that, you had no idea. But then you saw him on stage. It was very visual. You saw just how confused he was. For a lot of Americans, at least 15 to 20%, they had not been exposed to that. And that was a moment that they couldn't unsee. And the Democratic Party lost a lot of credibility at that point and has never really recovered. And I think the assassination of Charlie Kirk was another one of those moments. And this next number that I think is extremely important is that right now, the Democratic Party has a negative 26 net favorability. That means the positive minus the negative. So they are negative 26% favorability for the party. That's twice as unpopular as Republicans, and nearly 3 times as much as Donald Trump, who's the most popular politician in the country. This is where Democrats are at this point, and why the J. Jones situation we talked about earlier in Virginia is a problem for them. And right now you look at Mamdani as the future of the party and AOC is the future of the party. Who do they have who can step up and take the party over and lead them? I don't see who that is. So I think we're watching a transformation of that party. I think we're seeing that party transform into the Democratic Socialists of America, and that's where the energy is. So you can follow that. But that's all very serious stuff. But I think a little more fun. Let's go to the meme war. This has been a unique thing of this shutdown. That whoever thought that we'd be talking about sombreros and cat videos and everything else. And one of the things that it shows that there's no leadership on the Democratic side. I think what's positive they've had happen in the shutdown has not been because of the leaders. Schumer and Jeffries are not great. It's been the other elected officials in the Senate in particular who've been singing from the same hymnal and have the media to back them up through that process. That's where they've been able to keep themselves going. But the watching Hakeem Jeffries absolutely melt after becoming the butt of a joke for wearing a sombrero and a mustache in a video is just so pathetic. And I think it was said best by James Wood, the actor James Woods, who said Hakeem Jeffries is a walking punchline. And I think that's pretty true. So with that, let's take a moment to peruse some of the memes.
Hola, mi fellow Americanos, y bienvenidos al cierre de Schumer. That means welcome to the Schumer shutdown. We call it the Schumer siesta, right? It's the Schumer siesta. He put the government on siesta, crying Chuck. And El Hakimo Jefe Jeffries, we used to call him Dollar Store Obama, till we realized he's worth far less than $1. But they put the government on siesta to give illegal aliens your health care. We're not going to let it happen. I looked at both of them. I said, we're not going to let it happen. It's no bueno. I said, it's no bueno. They begged me. They said, but senor, por favor, please give illegal aliens the health care. I said, we're not going to do it. We're never going to do it. It's not going to happen. And they're also very upset about our big, beautiful sombreros. You look at them. These are the greatest sombreros the world has ever seen. We really have the best sombreros, and everybody wants one except Crying Chuck and El Hakimo Jefe Jeffries. They don't want one, but they're going to wear one when all is said and done. We're going to end the siesta. We're going to reopen the government, and we will not give in to the demands of Chuck and El Jefe. We're not going to do that. Thank you. God bless you. Dios lo bendiga, and God bless America. Thank you for your attention to this matter.
Anyway, that's beautiful there. That's actually Sean Farish, and you can find him on X at Sean, SHAWN _ Farish, FARASH. And you should give him a follow. He does a great impersonation of the president. And I think that's my favorite of all the memes so far. And I anyway, to think that would be where we'd end up. I think the vice president said it best, and that this is actually real. This is actually something that's happened. So Vice President Vance, if Representative Jeffries helps us open the government right now, the sombrero memes will stop. This is my solemn promise. So he has a road to have the ridicule and being the walking punchline could stop, though I have a feeling he's really the perfect foil for this whole thing. Both he and Schumer, they honestly, in a joking way, they cut the look of a villain from like the old Batman TV series in the 1960s, kind of caricature of a villain. So they're perfect foils for the country. But that's it's amazing. So I think Republicans, at least on that front, they've won the meme war. And if you saw the cat video that the Democrats put out, and you see the cringeworthy videos of Democrats walking around the Capitol, knocking on doors. It's all just very uncomfortable to watch. With that, let's go to New York City. And in New York City, we had big news in the last week. Eric Adams dropped out of the race, and that's now changing things up. But here I am on with I believe this is with Bianca De La Garza from Newsmax. We're talking about crime and New York City. And by the way, great show. She has two shows, one on Newsmax 2 and one on Newsmax, I think at noon on weekdays, Newsline and Newswire. So here's my conversation with Bianca.
But that's a fact, Dustin. And I think that shows in their ratings that they're telling stories that Americans are rejecting.
Absolutely. We've talked about this before, but we've been polling in the New York City mayor's race. And in New York City, which is has similar issues, but not as bad as Memphis, 85% of New Yorkers said that crime was a problem. Half of New Yorkers say it's a serious problem. We see this across the country in national polling. I've not seen polling in Memphis, but obviously people are tired of this because it's life and death to them. And you saw with what happened in D.C. and it happened in California earlier this year that there's been proof of concept now on how the administration can help in these issues. And now we're going to Memphis again. I think they just keep building the case that with this, pretty bold policy that they're actually making a difference in saving lives, and people want that. So thank you to Bianca for having me on and for that that conversation. And I want to go back. If you go to my X profile, I have a pinned on my X profile, x.com. I'm at Dustin Olson, DUSTIN OLSON. You can see I have all the information about October 7th and the public opinion, how that's changed over the past 2 years. You can check that out and you share, like, comment, but that's they're available for you if you want those details in writing, and I encourage you to go over there. So coming back to the New York mayor's race, we actually predicted that this was going to happen in our last poll. We had actually, the way I put it is I have 5 numbers that predict that Mayor Adams would be out of the race. And the 5 numbers, he had a net negative 35 net favorability. I was just talking about the Democratic Party's net favorability of negative 25%, which is, or 26%, which those are just, you don't see those numbers. Even Joe Biden, who was overwhelmingly unpopular, I think his worst was around negative 17, negative 18. And this has a real impact. We usually look at favorability as a predictor of where the ballot is going. So if you have a really high negative net favorability, you're going to be losing support over time. It's predictive of where you're going to end up in the horse race. And if you have a low net negative favorability, or you have a positive one, which with politicians doesn't happen too much these days, that you might maintain or increase your support. So the first number, he had a net negative 35 for Mayor Adams. I don't dislike the guy. He's probably, he and Sliwa are the best when it comes to dealing with the biggest issue in the city, which is crime, but you just can't come back from that. Second number that predicted that he was going to be out, 54% of the city said that the city was heading in the wrong direction. That's a pretty big deal. 69% said that they were less likely to back him because of the public corruption charges, whether they were fair or not. The Biden administration, largely, it seems, charged him for taking upgrades on Turkish Air and some hotel upgrades. And that was a big part of what the charges were. Also, there's some charges on using straw donors to be able to inflate how many donors they had for getting matching funds, which we'll get to in a second as to why that's important. But those are the public charges. Whether you think those were trumped up and he was being lawfared, well, for some people, they thought that was happening, and they didn't like that. But you have people on both sides really having issues, obviously, with that many people. 69% have a problem with that. And then for the people who may have thought he was unfairly charged with that, but then the Trump administration dropped the charges, and all of it just, it was a good way to lose lots of different support. Then the next number is he came in fourth in every single poll. That there's just not a poll since, I don't know, maybe spring that ever had him anywhere but number 4. And then the final one, $0 coming in from matching funds. This is a weird thing that New York City does, that you raise a certain amount of money, then you get eligible for matching funds from taxpayer dollars. Kind of ridiculous, but it does have an impact on the race because of the charges that had been brought against him, alleging straw donors. The Matching Funds Commission said no dollars for you, and they kept rejecting him from getting that. So that meant that the money was going to run out for him. He was having a harder time raising money. All that together said that this was where the race was going to go. Now, my overall view of the race, having polled this continuously since late 23, is that crime is an issue in the city, and that Eric Adams has been pretty unpopular. We did the poll actually back in the end of 23 that showed that Cuomo could beat Adams in a Democratic primary. Now, Adams ultimately didn't end up in the primary because he knew he couldn't win. That got Cuomo to jump into the race, which is, fascinating to see how we've ended up where we've ended up. But Adams has had problems for quite some time, and with crime being an issue, we've asked questions about the defund the police position of Mamdani. Highly unpopular. Of all the issues, we had the globalized intifada and the BDS stuff with him. That was like 52%, so they're less likely. The government-run grocery stores, something like 54% said that they were less likely. But on the defund the police, 58% said that they were less likely to support Mamdani because of his defund the police positions, and calling to get rid of the strategic response group. That's the group that came in and responded to the first mass shooting in years in New York City and Manhattan. The guy who went in to shoot up the NFL and ended up in the wrong place, but a horrible thing. That the group that responded to that, Mamdani was for getting rid of. So this is not a popular position. And even with that 30% or so, that 1/3 of the city that has gotten pretty radical, that they say that they would like government-run grocery stores, that they like the BDS positions, that they think it's fine that he's refused to denounce globalize the intifada, which is an anti-Semitic and hateful statement. This is that group even doesn't support. It's about 22% say that they're more likely to vote for Mamdani because of his defund the police, where it's 30% and I think 33% for the globalized intifada and the government-run grocery stores. So that's pretty amazing to think that that is the issue. So what needed to happen in this race is Eric Adams probably needed to get out a little bit sooner, and we needed to have people going after Mamdani with ads. That has not happened. In a minute, we'll see what the first ad out of the gate for Cuomo was. But we anticipated that Adams would be out. So this is what we had is the likely outcome immediately following Adams dropping out. We have Mamdani at 38.5%, Cuomo at 30.3%, and we have Sliwa at 23%. I think that Cuomo may be lucky if that's what he's getting. I think Mamdani has likely made it into the 40s now, and I know there's polls that show 47%. A lot of these are being done in certain methodologies that are going to get more supporters from Mamdani. But regardless, he's definitely consolidating the race right now, and is pretty shockingly able to do so. But that's because nobody has actually done advertising. If you watch cable TV, you know all about Mamdani, but that's not most people. So he has really gotten through this whole thing unscathed, partly from having multiple opponents. They have to worry about each other. They had to get each other out of the race to be able to have this thing change. So what we needed to see is people just unleash with ads talking about defund the police and crime. As I talked about in that clip, 85% of New Yorkers say that crime is a problem. Nearly 50% say it's a serious problem. This is the issue, and he's no one's really taking him to task for it in paid advertising. So with that, I just told you what you needed to do to win this race, and this is what Andrew Cuomo came up with to start his advertising campaign.
I'm Andrew Cuomo, and I could pretend to do a lot of jobs. But I know what I know, and I know what I don't know. And I do know how to make government work. I'll hire 5,000 new cops to partner with local community groups and keep our families safe. And we'll get the homeless off the streets and into the help they desperately need. There are a lot of jobs I can't do, but I'm ready to be your mayor on day one.
You may not have noticed, but he was not actually cleaning windows on the side of a skyscraper. He was not doing any of those jobs. The energetic Cuomo that you saw there's a little note at the bottom. It says AI generated. And first of all, the fact that a guy who's pretty well known, they're coming out with the positive ad. They really, to have a shot, they had to go after Mamdani. So that's the first mistake. But the second thing is they put in an energetic, artificially created Cuomo next to the low energy real Cuomo, and it's an amazing contrast. The biggest complaint about Cuomo since before he lost the Democratic primary to Mamdani is that he just wasn't in the fight. He didn't seem to have the fire in his belly. And then they come out with the ad where you can actually see what an energetic Cuomo would look like compared to the actual Cuomo. And I think that was pretty bad. But it's, the issues that they're talking about he's, generally on the right track. Now, this next ad's a case of why Mamdani believes he has this sewn up. But I apologize ahead of time. It is cringeworthy.
You deserve better. You deserve to be able to raise your family here, to be safe, to travel where you need to, free of costs and worry. You deserve someone who works as hard as you do, who thinks about you every second of the day. That's the kind of mayor I promise to be. New York, will you accept this rose?
Paid for by Zoran for NYC.
Gosh. That just makes me feel so uncomfortable. I don't know about you, but that was to air, I believe, during the Golden Bachelor. And when you don't really have to fight too hard, you do, I guess, gimmicky, goofy things like that. And I don't know, it just makes me uncomfortable. Honestly, the Golden Bachelor probably could be his father or maybe his grandfather. He's so young. I think one of the comments that Cuomo recently made about Mamdani is that this will be his first real job besides being a part-time state legislator. And that's pretty darn close to true. So anyway, that's what he decided was his best ad to be running at this time. So that's the New York City mayor's race. And I don't think we're going to, at this point, get much of a shakeup in that race, unfortunately. But I do think, as we talked about earlier, New Jersey, Virginia, we could see some shakeups there. For Virginia, obviously at this point, if Virginia were to vote for Jay Jones, that's just I'm moving out of here. I mean, that's just crazy. But that is so that's going to change no matter what. But New Jersey, Republicans win New Jersey, and they win some things in Virginia, then that's a pretty amazing odd year election. And Mamdani is, that's crazy to think that he could pull it off. But considering this, just the nature of the race, most New Yorkers want somebody else. It's just the dynamics of how things happened that they're not going to get somebody else. That's why he wins. And then he's a great foil for Republicans going forward, in my opinion. So with that, thank you for taking some time to be with me today to talk about public opinion, talk about polling strategy, talking about issues that are important to our country and to the world, and to take some time to do that. Thank you for the comments and questions. We didn't get to everybody's comment or question, but thank you for posting them. And please do, if you're watching this later, please post comments, questions, make a review. We appreciate it. Like, follow, and subscribe wherever you enjoy your podcasts. We do appreciate it. Helps amplify the message, amplify the show, helps more people learn how they can be more engaged in the political process and understand better how politics works, pull back the curtain, understand that. And we really appreciate anybody who likes, follows, and subscribes. Of course, if you liked any of the polling that we talked about, you can go to pollingclub.com to sign up, or go to politicaltradesecrets.com to get notices of when we do our programs. But with that, thank you very much for being here, and I'll see you next time on the next Political Trade Secrets.
Join us next time by subscribing on iTunes and get show notes and sign up for our newsletter at politicaltradesecrets.com.